Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third webinar of my amazing collaboration with Startup XS. And I really want to thank you for coming to this presentation. And in this presentation, I'm gonna share with you guys how to make a perfect pitch. So if you guys went through with the when you guys were registering for this event, um, you guys saw that the premise of what this presentation was all about was to help people, or just provide some tips. And I say here rules that can really help you tell a story rather than just presenting a product or a service. And at the same time, give you the opportunity to share your own personal story as you're writing a pitch for your startup, right? And I think that's very critical from an emotional perspective to really navigate to how to navigate that in a very balanced way, such that your investors or whoever you want to bring on your team can really relate and connect with the essence of your product. So that's the premise of this presentation, and I'm really grateful for the staff at Startup XS for giving me the opportunity again, third time, to share, my startup processes, my startup tips and advice, which we have two previous videos that we have done last year in 2020. So I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I think hopefully you will learn, you have the opportunity to learn something from this. So I will go ahead and we'll start the presentation. One second. So for this first, okay. So just to give you guys a background about myself, so my name is Jacob. If you guys have watched the earlier videos, I went to Babson for undergrad, and for my grad program, I did an MBA there as well as a Masters of Science in Finance last year in 2020. And I also was a Babson Innovation Fellow in Uganda in 2017. Right now, we're building a platform called the Pre-Entrepreneurship School, where we provide guidelines, principles, tools, exercises to invite curious minds within the ages of 18 to 40 to know more about entrepreneurship and how to start a business, right? The premise in itself is not just to start a business, but also to learn how to develop an entrepreneur mindset, to be disciplined, as well as to live your life that you really wish for, live your life to the fullest. So we have certain workshops that can help you really build yourself up in a way that you be well prepared to pursue that career or that life that you really wanted, right? So in addition to meditation classes, reading rooms, finance workshops, we also organize all that, and also some principles that I designed, 20 principles that are designed to help you develop yourself, but also to help you understand how to pick a great startup idea. In addition, I founded this company called Germany Corporate Group, where we provide funding. We advise startups in Uganda on how to build a very sustainable business, and also help them uh, um, on their journey on how to raise the right funding vehicle, and as well as in the process create jobs and create social impact with the study in Uganda, hopefully across Africa. So that's just an introduction of myself, and we're gonna go into the presentation. So just one second. So so when you're always talking about building a pitch, a perfect pitch, it always has to be with telling a story, right? When you always tell a story, it's very relatable, and people can really connect with you and give you and kind of see where you're coming from, right? And I think a great story will always provide a great product. That's a personal understanding of mine. I think I've seen that in many of the other startups that I've been fortunate to talk to or interact with, or perhaps help consult in your in your consult with them as founders. And I think you always have to think about how can I build a story from the beginning to the end. and the story has to be well connected. It has to be well integrated for whoever you're pitching to. Hopefully, if this is an investor or this um, a co-founder they want to bring on the team, there has to be one unified story, and I think that will help a lot to really get people really excited, but also inspired on how you are trying to build this amazing company or amazing startup that you're thinking about. So, one thing that is really important, in addition to inspiring people, is that you have to sell yourself. If you're just a solo founder, you have to really sell yourself in a way that is not very edgy, it's not very, it doesn't come off like a con person, but you have to show beyond the inspiration how competent you are and actually provide access to your strength, right? So this slide basically just shows that before you even go into the idea, try to actually pitch your team. If it's just you, tell your story. Beyond the story, tell what you're confident about, tell what you have achieved, tell the other counterpart what are the experiences you have had that has led you up to this stage. And I think it's very critical because before you start up into the idea, people always have a preconceived notion that everybody has a great idea, right? But if you start with this, the point number two of how to make a perfect pitch, you actually create a very good, you actually take off that biased, perhaps that most people might have, especially investors when you're pitching them. So just always present yourself first. Some people prefer to do it later at the end of a presentation for the pitches, but you always, I think, it's advisable to always start with the second phase. Always start with your team and kind of promote your team. So the next thing is once you actually have an idea, before you even get, so this is like we're trying to we're starting from a very macro level. You inspire. That was the first one. Tell a great story. The second is to build a really tell a story about your team. And the third one is defining the ecosystem. So before you even get into the idea and the specificity of the idea, define the ecosystem that problem is trying to address, right? I just put a bar chart here and some numbers, but it's a macro, just a macro perspective of what the whole of that system encompasses, right? And let me say, for example, if you're trying to solve a problem in education in East Africa, right? Try to give a big problem, not just of education, but of how poor education has led to poor healthcare, poor education has led to lack of a democratic system because people are not well informed. So this is not just within that industry. Always give the picture of the whole ecosystem. What has the lack of that resource or that tool or that service led to a very unfortunate consequences, right? So when I talk about ecosystem, I'm talking about not only the industry but also the stakeholders that are involved in that ecosystem that has led to the negative consequences that you're trying to solve. And it's always good to just give one number, make your slides very clean. I just put 2% there. Don't put more than two numbers. It's always good to just put just one specific number, and your graph should be very clear and very succinct. I think that helps with clarity. It helps with it just helps your viewers get like you have actually done the research and you figure out what the priority of your problem is. But people say, what are ecosystems? Ecosystem basically just shows the stakeholders, and stakeholders are just the people engaged in that process or that activity or that industry that you're trying to be of help to or you're trying to be a part of, right? So ecosystem basically just means people within an industry or a set of activities that are trying to address a problem similar to yours or indirectly have an impact to the problem you're trying to solve. So I think it's very critical that we define that clearly. The second phase, and this is going deep again into the third problem, which is similar to this like 3B. You have to address your problem from a very long-term view. Um, in some industries, the return on invested capital or ROI that people always reference to, which just means how long will you take to get your money back if you're pitching to an investor, can be shorter than 5 years, depending on the industry, right? Some high tech industries can have an ROI a very high ROI in less than 5 years. At the same time, you also want to show that there's some reasonable projection that you do for that ecosystem that you're trying to address, right? And I know some of you guys here are probably entrepreneurs. You guys are probably pitch your ideas, and you guys get the theme of what I'm trying to say. But it's always good to just show not just the financial profit of what the startup that you're trying to build, but also want to show the social cost profit analysis of what this product you're trying to build, right? Because once you get into the ecosystem, you want to boil down to the significance of why that problem needs to be addressed and how that will benefit the society, right? So this is a very daunting exercise because you really have to do some research, but it's really important that you figure out the economic and social profit analysis. And with something that's been going on, like with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's very important that we actually start addressing some of the social cost profit analysis, right? Because there are other things like climate change and all that, and it'd be very important that you list that out in your processes of how you're defining your idea moving along. So, next thing that we're gonna get into is the outline of the unique solutions. So right now you've done your ecosystem analysis. You have done the adjustable market of the problem in essence in the next 5 years. The next thing is coming up with the unique solution. And this one, if some of you guys, as I mentioned earlier, has probably done a pitch before, but this is very critical because not only are you showing that the solution is good, but you also want to show that the solution has a competitive edge in the market. And depending on what industry you are, you have to figure out how that you start up within that industry have a competitive edge that will make you stand out, not just financially again, but also economically and socially. And this is where it's very critical if you are in a emerging market or frontier market. Being a localized entrepreneur has an upper edge, right? Because if you are within that country, especially in emerging markets like India or Peru, we can talk about Rwanda. You have a competitive edge because if you have lived there for a while or you have stayed there for a long time, you understand how the people behave. You have the experience of a behavioral response of how people interact with products and services, and that's a very good competitive edge. So if you're starting a company in one of these areas, which I think most of you guys are from, especially Africa, um, the fact that you're already in that country is a very high competitive edge because you understand the behavior of people, right? So you have to list that clearly and bring that out. Don't deter from it. Actually, use that as an opportunity to say that is something that really I can understand my customers because at the end of the day, the essence is the customers, and that will give you that social edge as well as economic edge because you know the pricing points, the spot prices, as well as the future prices that can build a business that is sustainable over time. So that's very critical, and I think that's something that you should actually clearly present. And it should also encompass all what we've talked about earlier. It should be very inspiring because it's something that maybe you can relate to. It should tell it why you are the person to build a team, or why you're a person to start a company or build a team around it, which is to and building the ecosystem because you're in that local environment, which was about was three, giving the whole ecosystem, and 3B was kind of giving the social impact of it, and four that we just saw. We're trying to come up with something very succinct on how you have that competitive edge prior to this one. So the fact that you're localized can really help you, especially those of you guys who are here who are from emerging markets. Is very important. So number six is clearly outline the path for economic and social profit. So after you have actually, show the competitive edge, show a long-term vision of how this will have an impact of a social, will add social, human, and financial capital. I know I kind of mentioned it in the previous rule, but this one you have to explicitly elaborate on that because I think beyond just talking about how socially important it is, you have to come here with numbers here. You have to really show uh, why whatever you're trying to build has a combination of social, human, and financial capital. And in this case, when you're in this phase, especially if you're a very early stage startup, it's always good to have a very small sample size in this on this slide because you're able to quantify and also have a very good qualitative analysis of why you think there'll be a social, economic, and human capital add into the society, right? If you have a small sample size, starting small, you're able to do the data analysis, you're able to crowdsource the data, whatever means that you is feasible in the climate or the environment that you're building a startup. But in this role, you have to explicitly state that, and I think it's very critical for you as an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur to get this right. Rule 7 is you have to really clearly state how this product or this platform or whatever you're trying to build, how that will impact not just the investors but people out of the investment platform. Because at the end of the day, how successful your startup is not just based on investors, because you just give you the money, they just give you the financial capital. But for your company to grow and flourish, you need to show why the investors will benefit out of that, because you have to state the importance of integration such as community integration, government alliances, customer high customer acquisitions and retention, right? So no, when you present, don't only try to appease the investors, because the investors is just a very they have a large voice, but they are not explicitly the people that actually make the business successful. You really have to think of the customers. You have to think of all the important alliances that is critical to build your business in the long term. The people that bring in the revenue, right? Because the investors are more of a creditor, right? But you want to think about the people that actually make the business flourish, the people that actually create the market, the people that actually make the difference for you to see the profit that is necessary. So once you're always stating that, it's critical that you actually state that clearly and make that succinctly, right? So that people can really get an essence of why your company can literally, in some instances, especially in emerging markets, can literally create new markets, right? Can literally get the local community involved, can literally contribute to the GDP per capita of that country, can literally transform the way youth around that nation is going to impact is going to contribute to society, right? Your startup can be part of that movement, and it's critical that you also include that in your startup. Number 8 is, as I said earlier, right? In rule 1, you tell an inspiring story, but you have to continue doing that, right? And number 8, I see clearly state that tell an inspiring story of not just how your solution is going to address that specific problem, but also how it's going to affect the ecosystem. So if you guys remember, I think it was it was actually rule 2. No, rule 2 is the team. Rule 3, 3A and 3B. The goal was you have to actually be able to list out your ecosystem, right? And in this case, your solution should not just address a specific problem. So let me say, for example, you want to solve education, childhood education in Kenya or Rwanda, for example, right? You can say, yes, I'm going to provide, you know, um, an app that will help connect teachers who are distant from kids who can't get to school, to teach them, send them like some reading passages or stuff like that. That is great. At the same time, you want to also explain how that story is not only going to affect that teacher-student relationship, but it's how it's going to transform the way people think about education in that country, or how they, as a result of that, uh, the use of technology, there will be a systemic shift or dynamic shift of how education is going to be done in the future, right? In addition, you can also list how technology not just affects education, but it can actually get into healthcare education, right? Because these kids have to use their mom's phone, for example, and the moms can actually get information about maternal health and all of that. So you can actually see how that can navigate not just within education, but you can also get into healthcare space and all that. And so basically think out of the box a little bit, but don't go too far out of the box, because it's important that we stay within the range of what we are trying to explain. But at the same time, we really want to inspire them that this product is not just a specific product or just address one problem. You also have to show that it actually can affect a whole ecosystem, which I think is critical for you to actually be a successful entrepreneur, as well as someone that can actually inspire and motivate people to buy your product, right? So to number 9, this is a little bit tricky because you do a lot of we all do a lot of projections, right? And someone who studied finance at Babson College that I iterated earlier, we have to make sure that we give an estimate of what we're going to generate over time, but also how the process is going to work, like the implementation phase and the different phases that we're going to deliver the product, right? This timeline just helps the investor, if you're pitching in front of an investor, just understand that you have done some critical thinking as well as some thorough analysis of how you're going to deliver the product or how you're going to expand over time. In most instances, it's not going to be ideal because things happen. For example, in 2020, we had the COVID pandemic, and I can guarantee you most of the startups in 2018 or 2019 thought, probably the gross profits is going to increase by 25, 30%. Tech companies probably by 45 or 50% or more. But with just a clear understanding of what you know now and what you think can be reasonable enough to create some for you to implement as a startup, always try to provide a timeline just to get the investors to know that you're thinking about it in the long term. It's not a one-time 1 year gig or 2 year gig. uh, Thoroughly think about it, thoroughly think of a creative way to present this in a way that is reasonable, it makes sense, and it's also very it's critically important for the people that you're trying to serve to see that this is something that is feasible within a time frame that you're trying to tackle that problem within that ecosystem. So I think that'll be a good way to kind of present it. So, and the last and the 10th rule is, you have to always end with hope. I know there's some people, especially some entrepreneurs that um, they have gone through pain, they've gone through struggle, and I think those are the things that really make entrepreneurs who are very compassionate, who are very empathetic, who are very really passionate about the product and service. And sometimes it might just come off. It may come off as it's just a painful story, right? And there's a lot of struggles and there's a lot of inequality and all that, which we do know, all of us. I presume that we understand a lot of challenges in the world, and there are a lot of problems that has to be solved. At the same time, your product should provide hope, right? It should provide a sense of purpose to what you were trying to say in the beginning of your story. It should give people an essence of that you're trying to shift things towards a positive direction. And even though your startup will not, might not necessarily transform the world, you can play a role in changing the stories that you have presented, the pain, the problems, or the ecosystem challenges into something that is hopeful, but also something that connects people to that story, to the story that you mentioned earlier, your own personal story, or the story of someone you met that actually inspire you to build a product. So those are the 10 rules that I wanted to share with you guys. And the next phase of this talk, I would like to give you guys an example uh, of what this means. So this is one of the project I'm working on, and the project is actually to help connect um, entrepreneurs in schools, in colleges, in Uganda. It was still in the very preliminary stages, but our goal and something that based on the presentation I just did earlier, the first thing that I always advise you based on rule one is that you want to start inspiring stories. So if you can see this lady, it's a young farmer, and there's a lot of things that she wants to do. She wants to provide healthy food. She wants to utilize some of the resources she has, like the farm behind her. She also wants to be a macro entrepreneur, a micro entrepreneur. She wants to provide to her family, but she also wants to make sure people can eat, right? And we always presume that eating is something very basic and everybody has access to food, but no. And it's kind of the big vision, and I think the story that I think is inspiring here is that we want everybody, not just men, but men and women, to be able to be a part of the story to transform the continent of Africa, providing every other entrepreneur or every entrepreneur actually the tools and resources that they need to actually build a successful business. That is our vision, that's our goal, and that's our top priority. So, right, it's kind of appealing to rule one. The story is that most of the time women, especially in Africa, are not given the resources or the tools for them to actually build successful companies. But through our project, as an example, we want to use want to actually provide all the necessary resources, both men, women, and men, to be able to build successful company. And we think that having both both genders contributing significantly to economy will actually help the continent grow, will actually transform the continent, which is considered the last frontier in the world, right? And one thing that I didn't mention in the 10 rules, but something that I think is critical is also to always listen to our content, just to give you an idea of what you're trying to present, right? It gives people like a hint of what you're trying to present. And in some cases you might not need it, but I think in this example, I just wanted to show you so that it gives you context. And for those who just joined, we will talk about 10 rules to make a perfect pitch. And we also, went through how to make a pitch really ideal, but also very appealing with an inspiring story and, making sure that people can really understand the adjacent ecosystem and you actually ending with hope, right, to build your startup. And I gave all the processes of how to present succinct data. Right now, I'm giving an example of a project I'm working on in Uganda where we're trying to transform the continent of Africa one entrepreneur at a time, providing gender equality to every entrepreneur that we get to interact and work with through partnerships with some of the universities that I'm going to show you guys in the next slide. So this project is called Germany Ventures Academy. It's part of Germany Corporate Group, and that's something that we're working towards. So back to this slide, we have table of content, and table of content is providing, in essence, it just gives you guys a hint of what we are trying to present to investors or to the people that we're trying to invite into this project through the partnerships and negotiation that we have, right? So it's always good. It's not necessarily if you think you don't really need it, it depends, but I think it's a good sign to show that things are gonna things are everything is in place and you have a direction of how to present your pitch. So understand the market. In this case, understand the ecosystem, which I mentioned in the 10 rules, right? And in my case, what we saw as a market opportunity is that there are a lot of entrepreneurial programs and universities in Africa, such as the African Leadership Academy, which is a very prominent entrepreneurial school in South Africa. Asachi University, which is based in Ghana, very good universities, but there's this, and they have students that have so much potential and at the same time, you have great organizations from the United States, such as the Gates Foundation and Zuckerberg Child Initiative, that has a lot of potential. I've seen a lot of potential in entrepreneurial youth. The goal of Germany in this market creating opportunity, as well as in the ecosystem, is to shape the entrepreneurial ecosystem. What I mean by that is, creating partnerships with some of these universities and sharing with them high quality curriculums designed here in the United States, as well as provide a portal for job creation and development through some of the platforms that we're building, like the pre-entrepreneurship school, for us to actually engage the students. So the value here and the market ecosystem that we see in this specific example I'm trying to share is that there's a high output just recently, not a while ago, but just recently, where the area of youth that have been trained in very great universities like LAA and Asahi University, and there are also a lot of international organizations like Zuckerberg and Gates Foundation that are trying to support youth in entrepreneurship in Africa, and we think we can be a bridge where we connect these youth to these opportunities, and at the same time fill in the void of maybe the mentorship and the training that is needed for them to actually grow their businesses. And I think that is where the ecosystem is. And I think with this, we're going to create jobs. We're going to provide education to them. We're going to help transform some of these countries such as Ghana and South Africa for a more inclusive society and a more transparent, but also a very effective one with entrepreneurs who are able to address some of these bigger issues. So just to kind of specifically go into this example, that we say there's still some pockets in Africa where youth, specifically university students, don't have resources to become entrepreneurs, right? And we want to use some of the resources that universities have, the foundation like Gates Foundation organizations, to ally with them and provide all the necessary resources that these university students who sometimes don't go to the privileged universities can have access to, the resources, the entrepreneurial tools and resources they can have in order for them to start building some of these amazing ideas that they have in their mind. So we think this is a micro problem. This is an ecosystem problem. This slide is addressing the stakeholders, right? If you guys remember, I know I went a little bit too quickly, but the stakeholders here are the foundations, organizations, university, the students, and our entrepreneurs that are within these university foundation organizations, right, as well as us. So I've tried to address all the different stakeholders within the ecosystem, which was part of. route three or route three or route three B, right? And I think that's something that you always it's always great to actually address and specifically state in your pitch. So project objective, I know, is to be a liaison, to be a middleman, between experts here in the United States, organizations, universities, institutions, with some of the entrepreneurs in Africa who are aspiring to really or are intentionally committed to actually start building companies. And with some of our support, they can actually make that become a reality, right? That's kind of the project objective, and that's kind of the problem that we're trying to solve. So overview again, giving that resources to foundations, nonprofits across Africa, reaching out to campuses on the continent to provide Germany resources with the partnerships that we have. But one thing that I really focus on here, which might have not been elaborated in the rules, is that we actually just when we're doing our diagnosis, we're doing the analysis, which is clearly stated in in how you have to make a perfect pitch, but also it can be part of the ecosystem building that, or I kind of mentioned earlier. So in this case, we have some, a kind of a breakdown of the schools we want to reach out to, kind of a breakdown of the programs that we have to actually affiliate ourselves with, not just with the universities, but also with foundations that are willing and able to kind of list some of the resources for us, actually start connecting them with some of the students that we might need to reach out to, right? And this one is just a very breakdown of what we have been thinking about, how to navigate the schools that we can necessarily reach out to that have the they have like the prime students, that maybe they have a large student population, and some of them are falling out of the cracks because they don't have this very strong the student to teacher ratio is really high, or the teacher to student ratio is really low, right? So we want to make sure that we had to list that out. And this is part of the research analysis that is very critical once you're always presenting the data within your pitch, right? And so one thing that we've been focusing on is market rate investing and investor variable East Africa for most of our clients, and this is something that we are working on to kind of specify. And I think this is the essence of starting small, because you're able to get some numbers that can really help you navigate how to get around this problem. So proposed solution that we had, again, reach out to universities, kind of get people networking and in-person meets. That this was somewhat pre-COVID, but in-person meets are not feasible, so it's over Zoom. But the solutions here, and I think what I was trying to say is you have to always list an inspiring story, which I think was the last rule of what I mentioned in my earlier in the presentation. You want to make sure that it includes every stakeholder, but it also has this appeal that you want to transform the continent, right? So I'm very interested in youth development, aggressive in terms of how we network, but also want to actively ensure that there's a lot of stakeholders involved, so that the project can be sustainable. And exactly the process, if you guys remember, there was this timeline presented earlier. I just want to give people an idea of how you're going to do it, right? The process of that, which I think is very critical. And this slide just provides how we're going to reach out to the potential people that are going to help us reach that goal. Um, this is just a compensation slide for people that will be partnering with the organization, but it's not necessarily important in this case. Um, so one thing that I wanted to end, especially with this, was that this is where the inspiring part is. Africa has a lot of opportunities, and we have entrepreneurs that have built some very successful companies. Some of the companies that you guys might have seen online is Wave, Paystack, which just got acquired by Stripe, and Dela is a very good education training program, venture-backed company based that started in Nigeria, and the goal was to train the next coders around who are going to save or serve or work with 500 Fortune 500 companies around the world, right? These were started by African youth. Maybe some had studied in the United States or abroad, but these are the potential of the youth in Africa. And this is the inspiring part that I'm trying to elaborate here. There's a lot of young African entrepreneurs that build some really strong companies, and it's our turn to kind of give them the opportunity to actually build that value. A part of the inspirational story, which I think is very important to, is kind of list some numbers to show that in our case, Africa has a high return on investor capital versus some of the other emerging continents, or you might say, or even the global figure, which is 7.1% versus 11.4%. So vision here, which is something I've listed in the rules because it's an example. I kind of give a timeline of how we intend to expand and how we intend to build this project. But I think it's critical for people to see how it develops over time, and it helps people give some context of what is necessary for how you what you think about in terms of timeline, right? So ending with a very good story is always, we want every young entrepreneur in Africa to be successful, or should be successful, not to be, but should be successful, right? And that's kind of example of a project that hopefully you guys are able to see the value of following through these 10 rules, right? I'll just go quickly through all the rules so that it provides some context and bear with me, so we can get a very good analysis of what we have been trying to say. So first rule again is tell a good story. Second rule is to sell your team. Third rule is to define an ecosystem in numbers and succinct graphs. This is still part of 3. I was considered 3B, show the economic and social profit, which I tried to state in the example. Outline the unique solution. My case was, partnering with universities, and organizations globally to be the middleman. Clearly state the path of economic and social profit, something that I showed in the ROI, in my example, how your stakeholder will benefit from your solution, right? I think for Africa, I mentioned specifically for the entrepreneurs, but I think the institutions, the universities will benefit as well because it will show that the students can come back and donate money to some of the schools, which I think, but overall, I think they decide to improve. Tell an inspiring story of how that addresses the ecosystem. It's very critical. Number 9, set a timeline of what you're doing. And number 10, always end with a story with purpose. So those are the 10 rules. And I think this example was just to give an idea of what the project's about and how you can provide an example for that. And I just want to go back on that. So thank you again for joining. There are a couple of questions I'm going to address, but before that, I have some interesting stuff to share with you guys. So because I'm working with collaborative startup XS. I really want to give them a lot of credit and thank them for organizing this partnership. And we really want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join this webinar. I hope it was helpful. And if you want to really learn more about fundraising, make sure you check out the website that has some really, really incredible content. You just go to startupxs.com, and you're gonna see some really interesting stuff that they have. Very well laid out information and tools and resources that can really help you as an aspiring entrepreneur to actually start building things that really are valuable to you, but also can help you start, actually manifest what entrepreneurship is, right? But actually doing it, right? And I think this organization actually has a lot of resources that can really help you kind of start thinking about that and the tools that is needed. The one thing that is coming up really exciting is that they're offering, because you're here, and I think it's exciting, and thanks so much for joining. We Startup Access is offering an amazing discount for you just being here. You're just gonna pay $299 per year to be part of the Startup Premium membership, right? So this is a great opportunity for you to just go there and sign up right now. I think based on my experience working with them now for almost 5 months plus, almost half a year, I've been really amazed by how the team, incredible people, doing their best to serve people like you. And I think being a part of this premium membership will really make a difference on your entrepreneurial journey, but also how you're gonna think thoroughly, because sometimes it's not just solving a problem, it's also solving the right problem. And I think with webinars like this and all the resources that they have on the platform, they're really gonna make you start thinking in the right direction, but also how to develop the right solution. And most importantly, you're gonna give you the framework that is needed to build your company. So I think the $299 per year is a very good deal, and it's worth the investment. So yeah, this is time for questions, and I'm gonna there were already some questions that were already provided beforehand, and I'm just gonna answer them. And thank you guys so much for submitting the questions. I'm very grateful that you guys took the time, and most of the questions are were from around the world, and I'm very grateful that some of you guys took the time to do that. So here I am, and if you have questions, I think you can still submit. But some of the questions I've received so far is this question from Suresh Mittal from India, and he said, I think she said, what if the problem is not figured out within 5 years? That's a very interesting question because sometimes things happen, right? You can actually have um, you may actually have to pivot your problem, or maybe you have like an economic situation or a health situation like the COVID pandemic that it just throws all your concepts and your iterations, or even your proposal, your timeline off work, right? So I think one thing that's very important as an entrepreneur is that you have to be willing and able to pivot, right? But also to be flexible enough that if something happens, you're able to come up with a different proposal or a different solution on how to address certain problems. And I think that's very important as we think about entrepreneurship as a whole. We have to be very open to providing uh, solutions to certain needs that we have to meet based on certain unforeseen circumstances, right? So I think that's very critical as you think of being an entrepreneur. We have to always think of when you face a problem, especially when it doesn't meet the timeline, the 5 year timeline, the 3 year timeline, always be open to flexibility, always be open to not just going ahead, strong headed and getting to the problem, but always think of what are some of the alternatives that can keep me sustainable in the meantime, such that in the long term I can still achieve my goal, right? So the North Star should always be the same, but the journey to get there can change, right? And that's why you need a very good team, you need a very good mentor. You also need, platforms like Startup XS that has done some research for you that you can read and learn about what they've been doing. And I think that will help a lot on how you navigate challenges like this. So thank you, Suresh, for your question. That was a very good question. Um, the second question that we have is from Monica Pandey from Nepal, and she asked, "Can you tell me more about how to pitch an idea in an agriculturally based business?" So, pitching an idea in an agriculturally based business, because I think a lot of people do agriculture related projects. The goal of doing entrepreneurship in that kind of climate is to actually focus more on what is that thing that you're trying to build that you know very well? I mean, if it's a crop that your parents might have been growing that crop, or something that has some strong affinity to you, or something that has a very good story that is personal to you. I think that's a good place to start because it shows that there's some connection to it, to you, to that type of crop or that product. And but also something maybe you have done a lot of research on, because I think the competitive edge of every business is that either you really have a very interesting story, or you have done some really good research on a product or that crop that helps you really understand the need of being the agriculturalist, or I might say the person who is trying to kind of build that product, or kind of farm that husbandry that crop, right? So having that great story, or having that really, 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 really good research analysis, I think is very, very important when you start an agriculture-based business in places like Nepal, for instance, right? So that's something that you always have to be thinking about and trying to see what is unique about me in relation to that agriculture-based product that will be, or I can include in my pitch, right? That can help me in the long term to actually build a good business, an agriculture-based business. So I think that's a good place to start. More so, I think with agriculture-based businesses, when you always think of the collective effort, right? Maybe it's something that you have to do with, partnering with other young, amazing entrepreneur women who are trying to do something in that space. That can really give you a competitive edge, because I think one of the things in developing markets is that farmers work solo sometimes. If you can actually bring together a group of farmers that can actually help, build a consensus around that idea, it can give you a competitive edge against someone who is just trying to start by himself or herself. So those are just some tips, and it can be very specific to what country you are in. I think in Nepal is different from India or Nigeria. So do your research. Information is power, but also think of how can you differentiate yourself based on an inspiring story, based on the connection you had with a certain plant or what maybe your parents have been working on that plant and all that. So those are just some very good tips that can really help you get started. So thank you for that question. Another question that was asked was, can I apply for unsolicited proposals? If so, how to propose? How to propose? I think Silza from Denmark. So I'm not sure about how this. I think sometimes you just throw apply as much as possible to all the different brands, investment proposal, because this is a numbers game. But at the same time, I want to make sure that once you get feedback, you are iterating your proposal, you're adding, making changes, you're improving it, so that you're not just throwing out applications left out there without really figure out what's the reason why maybe you have rejections, or why your application is not going through the first, next round, the second round, the third round. So I think it's advisable to always think of what are the improvements needed, so that before you even apply to the next grant, you have an idea of what has to be improved and developed, right? So sometimes it's okay. I mean, if you meet the requirements and you want to actually apply for uh, you should apply. If there's no cost to application, you should go for it, and you can learn. We always learn the process. I think entrepreneurship is a series of failures that becomes a success story, right? So sometimes you can just go ahead and do it. So thank you again, Caesar from Denmark, for that question. So we have Mate from Norway, and her question is: can I approach a budget that exceeds the budget limitation of the funders? Yeah, depending on the funders, they might have different. Funders always want a product or service that actually exceeds, maybe your conservative projections, right? And if I think if the idea is really solid, you have a very good competitive edge, and there's a capacity for you to actually, maybe not necessarily monopolize the market, but actually create a new market. I do think that if they see that value in the long term, they're willing to give you the opportunity to go exceed the budget to start the project, because they know that over time, as you continue to develop the project, you have an opportunity to close that gap of that initial budget in the first year that you exceeded, right? Because at the end of the day, they want to just make sure that if your cost is going up, and your revenue also has to be going up, but it has to somewhat exceeds the revenue, the cost, so that you have this difference, which is the profit, right? If they know that with time you're able to kind of build something that makes sense, you can exceed the budget. But depending on the funders, and the capacity of how much you can invest in, it's possible that you can approach the budget with a little bit of aggressiveness. But I think the most important thing is the idea, the manifestation of how the idea is going to be done, your team, your story, what was mentioned before, and how you're going to strategize in a way that is actually feasible, but also has potential for long-term growth. So, so thank you, Emma, first for that question. So another question we have is from Mohammed Hussein from Pakistan, and he said how to, and his question is how to promote my business on a low budget. So I mean, the whole premise of promoting a business is to make sure that you want to either attract customers, right, or you want to retain your existing customers, provided that you're already providing some form of service. Now with social media and the proliferation of online of platforms that you can kind of actually use at little or no cost, literally, to reach out to people, it's a very good place to start. WhatsApp is a very good platform now, and WhatsApp, I think most people are on WhatsApp, especially in developing markets, and they use that a lot, right? You can actually make a very good poster of whatever you're trying to do and send it out to some of the groups of WhatsApp, and WhatsApp can actually have a high conversion rate. It's just how you present it and how appealing and very relatable your promotion is, right? Sometimes people just do posters, but I highly encourage you to make short videos of, like, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or even less than 1 minute. Just talk about the product that you're doing, and you share it on WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And depending on what platform or what you're trying to build, some actually have a high conversion rate than others. I think for me, I try to use LinkedIn more because it seems to have a high conversion rate based on what I'm doing. But some people might be more based on what they're doing. TikTok, for example, can be a better platform, or Instagram, or perhaps Facebook, right? But these platforms have a timeline that they are very popular and not many people are on them. I think right now you have TikTok as one of the TikTok as one of like the platforms that are really doing well, that people really watch and kind of are excited about. So maybe doing things on social media will help you provide or promote your business on the low cost. So thank you so much, Mohammed, for that question. I think it's a very good question, right? You always want to do things at a very low cost at the start. So the next question is from Tom. He's here in the US. He's a US citizen, and he wants to establish a business in Kenya. And he asked this question. So he's based in the US and he wants to establish a business in Kenya. And his question is like, what could be the solution for it? So what what I would say is that when you're based in one country and want to start a business in another country, the goal is that you need to find a very good local partner in that country. And when I mean a good local partner, you want someone that one really understands the market in that country, depending on what you guys are trying to build, has the experience to do a business. Perhaps someone who has started a business before, because starting a business and think of doing a business are two different things. You need someone who has the experience to start and build a business that I think will give you that competitive edge to be able to actually be increase their chances of being successful, right? So finding a local partner who is really hopefully very competent, or has to be competent, understand the market, has done a business before in Kenya, in this your case, and someone you trust, right? So very important, competent, understand the market, knows how to business, and someone you trust. I think those four things are very important. You need to trust the person needs to be competent, the person needs to know how to know how the market works, and the person needs to have had the experience. So I know these are very hard requirements, but I think these are very critical to increase your likelihood of success, right? So I'll spend more time actually working on that, finding that kind of person, than actually trying to start a business. It might succeed, but I think the chance of you succeeding is really low if you don't have that kind of a strong local partner. So Tom, I wish you the best. I think you definitely, hopefully find someone that can really help you build that business that you're thinking about. And hopefully use what we have explained here, perfect pitch, to kind of get out there and share it. One thing that I will say is that you can actually start like a YouTube channel or an Instagram account or a Facebook account, talk about your business, because you want to let your business out there. Don't be shy to share it. And through that, you can actually meet someone who is interested in what you're interested in. So don't just wait. Don't wait and expect that someone will come to you. Think of how can you promote yourself and your business so that you can actually pull in people in your network, or people that are uh, connected to your network, to actually know that you're interested in building something like this, and you share with the world. I think that's a very good way to actually start thinking about how to address this challenge of finding the right person to start a business with, especially from across the world. Last been two more questions. So one is from Rabina Tandan from India, and I think Rabina, she said, I already started business, but I'm still in limbo about my profit. What value range or percentage could be a good profit for a business that has already established 2 years ago? So I think that's a very interesting question. I think sometimes we have this timelines to kind of evaluate our business, which I think is important for us to have for as a benchmark to know how successful we're going and whether it is important for us to continue building a business. So I think that's invaluable and I think that's helpful. I think one thing that is critical is that you really just have to understand the fundamentals of the business. Is it something about the cost of the business, fixed cost or variable cost? Is it something that we have to focus more on increasing the revenue or increasing which means either increasing the prices or the quality of the products we're serving? So sometimes the fundamentals can be a good place to start, but also most importantly, we want to understand if we really figure out, because a 2 year benchmark, which ideally depend on what business you are in, Brabina, if you're listening or if you can watch the video later, I do think that you might have to reevaluate the market that you are in, and maybe the customers that you're serving is not the customers that you have to be serving at this moment, right? Um, and sometimes you have to reevaluate what is the need of the customers. There's this interesting theory from Professor Christensen, late Professor Christensen from Harvard Business School, that he said the most important thing is to learn about the job to be done for your product. What's the job that customers are going to? What's there's a job to be done theory. There's a job to be done that everybody needs, and there's a product that people are going to hire to achieve that job. So sometimes you really have to understand what's the job that people, what's the product that people will need to hire to achieve a certain job that people want to be done. And sometimes you have to really understand what your customer is. Simply put, it just means that you have to really understand what the problem your customer is trying to achieve, solve, and figure out what the right solution that product is. And so maybe one thing that I would suggest is that one, just look at your fundamentals of the business to try to think of whether your customers are the ideal customers, whether you have to scale up or scale down, or just change the market, the total addressable market, or the target market rather, or the target audience that you've been focusing on for the last 2 years, right? And I think that will help you, just navigate, hopefully get out of this kind of figure out what's the right, why they're in the right market to begin with, right? So don't get overwhelmed, or maybe perhaps not discouraged of the dismal performance, but think of maybe shifting the market to something else, or trying to figure out what are different markets they can get into. Hopefully, diversification is a very interesting. Diversification of the product might be a very interesting place to start. Try to build other products that are more affordable and accessible to other markets can be a good place to start. The last question is from, so Rabina, good luck. I think hopefully that helped and you give you a good sense of where to begin. But I do think that you should keep on moving forward. Maybe you have to diversify a little bit, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for you to actually do well in the next 2 years. So thanks so much for your question. The last question that I have here is from Enki from Mongolia. And her question is, how do I value my business for investors? So, depending on the type of investors, but there are three different types of investors. There are angel investors, there are VCs, venture capitalists, right? Then you have, private equity, which is like for very large corporations, large companies that need to be acquired. And there's so many in between now. There are new types of investors that have come into the pipeline, especially, in the late 2000s, right? And mid 2000s as well. So one thing that you should be thinking about NK is, how do I make my presentation show that if one, the market is really large, two, it's a wide, so market large means there's a wide space, two, my product is scalable, three, the cost as I scale is relatively low, so that, it's not that it's going up, profit is going up, but also cost is going up. You want to make sure it's very scalable. And four, you also want to make sure that you have the capacity to build that. You have the capacity to actually manage people, think critically about the product, and actually lead the team to actually achieve that goal, right? And when you say about valuing my business, which maybe you talk about the finances of it, understand how to do financial projections is kind of tricky, but just from your market size, you can actually gauge how much valuable your business would be, right? That's a very good place to start. But overall, you want to make sure that you do understand the market very well, that the target audience that you're trying to address, people that you can understand and know how much you can charge them for the price of your service, so that you're able to map out a reasonable projection in the next 2 to 3 or 5 years, and from there you can do an enterprise value to calculate your valuation. So I think the most important thing is, one, understand your value of your target audience, and from there you're able to get a certain price point that's necessary for you to actually build a business that is in the long term. So these are the questions I have, and I think what we have, that's all we have for now. And I think one thing that there's some more questions, and I was gonna share I'll kind of address some of these questions. So one person asks, who are, and these are questions that came on live, so I didn't get to see them, but it's just been sent to them right now. I just saw them now. So one of the questions I was asked, like, who are our shareholders and how do we recognize them? So shareholders are people that, so before a company goes public, shareholders are people that in some way affect your market in your business, right? So, for example, if you're starting like a farm agricultural business, shareholders include your customers, includes the buyers of the product, includes the government, because sometimes in some countries, the government, or in all countries, actually, the government has some role to play in agriculture. So, people that actually in some way affect your business, it can be, you know, government perhaps, customers for sure, investors, it's always if you have investors, sometimes foreign governments because they do import into that country. So shareholders are people that directly or indirectly affect the your business growth, business expansion, or maybe sometimes the fundamentals of business, right? You have to pay taxes sometimes. That is the fundamental essence of a business, right? Identifying them are people that just have one way or the other impacting your business. It can be a day-to-day operations, or it can be maybe yearly or biannually interaction. But suppliers are also shareholders. Many all the people that have impact in your business is very. I think it's very. Those are the shareholders, and that's how you recognize them. So shareholders doesn't necessarily mean like this is a company that's gone public and the people that buy stock in the company are called shareholders, which that also means shareholder. But I think pre-public shareholders can actually be not just the investors, but also other people like employees. There are some companies that actually employees are part of the shareholders of the company. But I think in this presentation, I talk about stakeholders, not shareholders. Stakeholders is different. So that's more inclusive. It incorporates every other person, not just the customers, buyers, sellers, and the investors and the entrepreneurs, but the whole ecosystem. And I think that's different from shareholders. So someone said, can you talk about pitching an idea? So pitching idea basically is kind of what I just went through. Is helping you understand, just how to tell a good story, an inspiring story, a story that's captivating. You have some very good sourcing numbers that shows the ecosystem and all the stakeholders involved, and a unique solution with a good competitive edge that will help you stand out in your business. And I think that's very critically important. So, the kind of example that I was trying to share was the Germany Ventures Academy, which is an education program to connect students to universities in resources in universities in Africa that already have some of the entrepreneurial tools and resources, as well as to institutions and non-profit organizations, right? I hope that pitch was kind of gave a good idea of how to make a good pitch, the pitch I shared. But I also think that a good pitch is a pitch that is just very relatable. There's some essence of a good story and the value of how to create financial, social, and economic impact, right? Um, so I think perhaps that's why I give the example. If it was not clear enough, I think you can just watch this video again. I think the members of Startup Access are going to share this video on YouTube, so you can actually just watch that again if you think you didn't get that clearly. But there are many examples of good pitches. I think um, that example I provided probably helped you get a better sense of it. But I'm willing to share more based on. You can connect later after this video, so I can address all the other questions. But I think there are many examples. There's some good examples that you can find them on YouTube. That really gives a very succinct application of some of this of how to make a good pitch, which I think addresses some of these 10 rules of a pitch, right? Um, so yeah, but if you still feel a little bit confused, just watch the video again and please reach out as well. And the other question that just came in during life was like, we have a new business online and we're new to it. We are working for the past 2 years, but we don't have clients yet. Which strategies shall we use to get more businesses? So one is that so 2 years is reasonable for you to start figuring out how to get new clients. I think I mentioned earlier in some of the questions and answers. One, like we use all these available platforms out there, this social media, try to utilize them well. Just check them out. Uh, pull in a few dollars behind that, and you'll be surprised how much you are able to acquire new customers as a result of that, right? So try to try many things, right? And sometimes you might not get it right the first time, but I think social media is a very good space to get new clients. And sometimes you always can ask your existing clients, like, what are they using now and how are they, what are the challenges that they're facing, and from there you can understand some of the problems that they might be facing, and that can give you an idea of what the next product is, or how to address new clients. But I'll suggest that you should think of strategies not as from a very businessy perspective, but something that can be as simple and accessible, like social media, but using in a very wise way. There are social media ads that are very impactful that can actually create so much value for the. So hopefully that helps, and I think that's something I think about. But also just asking your current customers, like, what are you thinking about? What are some of the things we can improve, and what are the things that you need? Because sometimes you don't need new clients. Sometimes you just need to improve on. You can work your existing clients to actually build better product, up to your product and services, so that you upsell to them, right? And that can be a good place to get you running. So I don't know whether this presentation is going to be on YouTube, so you can actually watch this video again. And I think that will be a good place to actually just kind of rewatch all what I've said. And I think that's a good place to start. So that is it for now. And thank you so much for staying here. Thank you so much for Startup XS for doing this with me. And I think we're going to have some more exciting videos and presentations on entrepreneurship and some exciting projects to work with you guys. And I'm really excited that you guys had the time to join today. And thank you so much for the great questions. And please feel free to connect later if you have more questions. But I really appreciate the fact that you guys took the time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar. And I'm looking forward to having you guys again for the next session. And the questions were amazing. I wish you guys all the best as you guys think of making a perfect pitch. And hopefully we're going to meet again soon. So thank you so much. I think those are all the questions we have. So if there are any more questions, you can always reach out to the team, and I'll be happy to tag along and help as well. So thank you guys, and have a great day, and thanks for stopping by.